Orientation is locked. Rotate device back. So it has to be up like this way. Okay, we're live. So, hi. I'm George from Ireland. So this is a video requested by one of my 1,600 faithful subscribers. And this is about His Royal Highness, Prince Andrew, and the late, not so great, Jeffrey Epstein. So the unlamented Jeffrey Epstein took his life about a fortnight ago. That's 2 weeks ago if you're American, although the conspiracy theories are swirling. The internet is abuzz with rumours that he was bumped off at the behest of some mysterious figure who didn't want his name dragged into the shadows as having been involved in Mr. Epstein's pernicious underage sex ring. So who's Prince Andrew? Right, obviously he's the Prince of the United Kingdom, born in the UK in 1960. His mother is Queen Elizabeth II. Prince Charles is his older brother. So Prince Andrew is not in line to the throne. He's the third child and the second son in that family. Now, the second son of the British monarch usually gets the title Duke of York, and indeed Prince Andrew was awarded the title Duke of York on his wedding day, not for achieving anything particularly, but that's just the custom. The monarch's second son is the Duke of York. So Prince Andrew, he's named after his grandfather, Prince Andrew of Greece, because Prince Andrew's father is Prince Philip. Remember, Prince Philip was born in Greece, part of the Greek royal family, and that's that. So, okay, so Prince Andrew, who went to Gordonston School in Scotland, and obviously had a couple of bodyguards there, had to go with him when he was chasing girls in the woods, not literally chasing, not in the Epstein sense. And then he was his brother as a supporter, best man to you and me, when his brother Prince Charles married Lady Diana, because they don't have a best man in the royal family, they call it supporter for some reason. Best known to themselves, they have all these quirky customs. And he went to Dartmouth, which is the Royal Naval College, to train as a Royal Naval Officer, and he did that. So he had an active and a substantive rank. He wasn't promoted that high in the Royal Navy, but he had to be honorary, whatever it was. And he said the two were completely distinct, and his senior officers grasped that. So when he was there in his honorary capacity, they would treat him with the most obtrusive, deference. What is obtrusive the word? Obsequious deference, obvious deference. But when he was in his actual rank, they'd sometimes dress him down. He'd get a tongue lashing if he'd fouled up in some way. Now, the real highlight in Prince Andrew's life is when he met me when I was 13, and he came to my prep school. And he had to cut it short because he was going to Aberdeen to the hospital to see his grandmother, the late Empress of India, the Queen Mother, because she was ill. But anyway, one of the few things I remember His Royal Highness saying is that, you have exams all your life, and whereas in the Royal Navy, he had to take all sorts of exams for promotion to his next rank. But he was taking a lot of time off the Royal Navy for his princely duties, cutting the ribbon here and there. So famously, in 1986, he married Sarah Ferguson. Miss Ferguson was the daughter of the royal family's polo manager. Miss Ferguson's life had been somewhat disrupted when she was a teenager. Scandal was caused in equestrian circles in the United Kingdom. Her mother ran off with an Argentine polo player several years younger than her and went off to live in the Argentine Republic. And his father remarried, had 3 children with his second wife, blah, blah, blah. Sarah Ferguson felt a bit neglected. And when she left school, I think it was called Hurst Lodge she went to, she lived with 2 different men several years older than herself. This is the late 70s, and that was still highly controversial. Cohabitation was not on, particularly if he came from an aristocratic family. Might have been considered disgraceful for a woman, not for a man. And then she wore a white wedding dress on her wedding day, and I remember an old lady saying, really, she had a nerve to dare to wear a white wedding gown as a bride, as though she were a virgin. And her father, he got himself into a bit of trouble in the late 80s when it was revealed that he was going to a massage parlour which offered a number of sexual services a la carte. So that was Prince Andrew's wedding. He had previously been involved with Koo Stark, who'd appeared in an adult film and thought to be an unsuitable bride for someone who was second in line to the throne for a while. Second in line to the throne for a bit. So he married Miss Ferguson. They had 2 daughters in quick succession, Beatrice and Eugenie. One of them has recently got married, so Prince Andrew no doubt will be a grandfather ere long. But Randy Andy, as he was known, by the early 90s he was philandering, and in the spring of 1992 it broke that his eyes had wandered, and those of his wife had as well. So their marriage hadn't lasted kissing time really, about 6 years. So as soon as the younger daughter could walk, they were both bed hopping. So he wasn't known as Randy Andy for nothing. I'm not sure if in the United States this word means the same, but Randy, this side of the pond, means someone who's very, very lascivious, someone with an egregiously high sex drive. So, like a sailor, a wife in every port. But I don't think he used salty language, at least. One thing is he's completely abstemious. He doesn't drink alcohol whatsoever, which is highly unusual for a social stat. And then it came to light that his wife, the Duchess of York, Sarah Ferguson, she was being advised by a balding Texan called John Bryan. And this 6-foot American chap was advising her so well that she would sunbathe topless beside him at a villa in southern France. And his financial advice extended to kissing her toes. A paparazzi took photos of this. Ooh, I'm getting a comment. Yes, the foot fetish. That's John Bryan, the American chap, kissing her toes, not sucking them, as it was said. And so he was known as the abominable toe man. But he had to go from toe job to no job. So the scandal broke. It was splashed all over the papers. This was not quite the behavior expected of a princess of the United Kingdom. So if it was sucking her toes, what else was he sucking and what was she sucking? Well, this is a family show, so I shan't elaborate. But anyway, it might cast a question mark over the paternity of her daughters, although I don't think anyone has seriously questioned that they were sired by the Duke of York. So their marriage was pretty soon on the rocks, so they divorced in short order. Not the first divorce in royal circles. Of course, Princess Margaret, that's Prince Andrew's aunt, she got divorced in the late 70s. And there were other ones. The Earl of Harewood, the Queen's cousin, he'd got divorced in the 70s likewise. So Prince Andrew, he decided he was going to leave the Royal Navy and be a roving ambassador for trade. So he spent a lot of time in the United States as well as in other places. And he got to know Ghislaine Maxwell. Well, Ghislaine Maxwell is a scion of a very well-known business family in the United Kingdom. Her father was Robert Maxwell. He was born Jan Hoch in Slovakia, or Czechoslovakia as it then was, in about 1923, into an impecunious Jewish family in a small town. What's this? Virginia Roberts says he had some foot massages. Ooh, video of him in Jeffrey Epstein's house. My word, how scandalous. Thank you. Keep these comments coming. Well, I'm not sure if Prince Andrew was a foot fetishist, but he might be into, what would you call it? Podiatrophilia. I'm not sure what that fetish is called. This paraphilia for feet, like a podiatrist. I'm making it up. I'm not exceedingly good at ancient Greek. Anyhow, so Ghislaine Maxwell was the 9th child and supposedly the favourite child of Robert Maxwell. Maxwell changed his name several times. Robert Maxwell was the 5th name he came up with for himself. Never trust a man who can't even tell the truth about his own name. He'd fled from Slovakia, been in France, the Second World War, then to the United Kingdom. He gave off several different accounts of how he came to be in the UK, joined the British Army. He was a man with the most extraordinary flair for languages and mastered the English language, became absolutely flawless. The sailors, the peg boy, absolutely gruesome. Well, I'm not sure what Prince Andrew got up to as a sailor. Well, let's do him some credit. The Falklands Conflict, 1982, he was a Royal Naval helicopter pilot, and he went to the South Atlantic to fight the Argentines. I wonder if it was awkward for ladies Sarah Ferguson, bearing in mind, well, they hadn't got married yet, actually. Sarah Ferguson's mother was living in Argentina at the time with her paramour. Anyhow, so the Argentines in 1982, they were writing "Saludos al Principito" on their missiles, greetings of the little prince. Yeah, John Bryan, that's quite correct, someone's commenting. John Bryan is the abominable toe man, okay? I invented that sobriquet for him. But he went from toe job to no job. He's still very much alive. No, he hasn't been bumped off. People said he might have got a trip to Paris, if you know what I mean. Because one of Princess Diana's lovers, he met with a nasty accident, supposedly crashing his motorbike, and there was supposedly a blinding flash beforehand. You may have heard of Richard Tomlinson, the MI6 agent who went rogue, who published The Big Breach, and he said that there was a plan to assassinate Slobodan Milosevic, the president of Serbia, in the mid-90s when it was a conference in Switzerland. And the idea was, when he's driving through one of those tunnels in the Alps, to blind the driver. Do you think Prince Andrew is guilty, as the prosecution says? You met him personally, interested to know if his personality suggested something more sinister or prevented it. I met Prince Andrew once for about 5 minutes, and that was in 1993, so I really can't say. I think he's entitled to the presumption of innocence as much as anybody else. I don't know a great deal about the evidence against him. So at the moment, I don't think there's anything conclusive. There's nothing forensic, like there's no DNA or there's no sort of CCTV footage. There's no confession from him. Indeed, they're consistent and vehement denials. So if I was a juror faced with what little evidence I know, I would be obliged to acquit. But, more particulars may come to light in time, and people have managed to cast a pall of doubt over the veracity of the testimony against him. And if there's more than a penumbra of doubt, I believe one is honour bound to cast one's vote not guilty as a juror. But anyway, back to Ghislaine Maxwell. So her father was a multimillionaire. He owned the Daily Mirror and various things. He was a Labour MP for a while, represented Buckingham, which has been obviously a rock-solid Tory seat for a long time. But in 1964, he managed to win it, only to lose about 6 years later. And he wanted to join the Conservative Unionist Party, but he knew the Tories wouldn't touch him with a 10-foot barge pole, so he joined Labour. He never made a convincing socialist, given that he was a most acquisitive and rapacious capitalist. But Robert Maxwell, well, he was up to no good. The Private Eye magazine, if you ever want to know what's really going on in the United Kingdom, then you ought to apprise yourself of Private Eye magazine. This satirical political commentary magazine will always connect the dots and tell you who's up to what and why, and reveal skullduggery, and people's secrets will be laid bare. And the mainstream press, Fleet Street newspapers, they wouldn't dare touch these things for fear of being sued to kingdom come. And indeed, Private Eye has often been sued to within an inch of bankruptcy. But Robert Maxwell, Private Eye was calling him Captain Bob, because supposedly it was a nickname that couldn't be traced to him. You can't prove that it's about him, what Robert Maxwell was up to. He supposedly was a terrible person to work for, an incredibly abusive boss, giving you an awful lot of verbal and sacking people willy-nilly. The one thing you can say for him is he did actually pay quite well, apparently. So he had a publishing company publishing scientific papers, and he was very close to all sorts of communist tyrants, and speaking up to them would be an absolute sycophant, throw them softball questions. Yes, laugh out loud, someone is saying. Hello, Jojo, Britain's craziest worm-loving woman. Well, okay, the worm has turned. Do you eat them? I used to know a worm farmer, actually. Honestly, they are farmed and sold to fishermen. But coming back to Ghislaine Maxwell, a name out of the Middle Ages. Is it from a King Arthur legend or something of that nature? Her dad, Robert Maxwell, he's nothing to do with Maxwell House Coffee. That's a common misconception. Maxwell House Coffee is owned by an American family. So Maxwell, he married a French woman just after the Second World War. And so Ghislaine Maxwell was born in Paris, half French, a British citizen too. I'm not sure if she's Israeli. She would be entitled to it as she's Jewish, even though it's on her father's side. So her father, he was always sucking up to communist dictators, and to Ceausescu, asking him in an interview, how do you account for your extraordinary popularity with the Romanian people? The peg boys were used by hundreds of those just saying a moment ago. I'm not sure what peg boys are. Are these, poor catamites in the Royal Navy? You're turning the barrel and all that. I don't think there's Roger the cabin boy these days. So Ghislaine Maxwell, she grew up in the United Kingdom, and her father, he rented Headington Hill House in Oxford. He rented from Oxford City Council. He joked it was the largest council house in the United Kingdom, because the council house was built by the local council, the local government, to provide low-cost housing for people on modest incomes. But this was, the Oxford City Council managed to buy this house. It was built for I don't know who, way back in the 19th century. It's a huge house just to east of Oxford City Centre. It's now part of Oxford Brookes University. Oxford Brookes University is not Oxford University. It's a separate one, also in the same city. So Ghislaine Maxwell, she went to Oxford. She read French, not terribly demanding, considering that she grew up bilingual. And when she graduated, she was just a super lady, a socialite. And about 1991, her father sent her to New York to try and be the face of his American operations. He was running to spread his business empire there, because he was a very considerable business mogul. And that's where she teamed up with Jeffrey Epstein, who entered banking in 1976. So Epstein came from a family of no great wealth, prestige, or social connections, and he didn't even have a degree. He somehow managed to get himself a job as a teacher. You wouldn't get that now, but rather few people went on to tertiary education in the 70s than they do these days. I'm not sure how the parents tolerated that. I can't remember the name of the body that was decapitated on his motorbike. Loved him, apparently. Princess Diana loved him, apparently. Charles made a comment that was Barry Manicky. I don't know who that was. Supposedly one of Princess Diana's lovers met with a nasty accident, but not very credible. That Pakistani heart surgeon, he's very much alive and kicking, and a few others, Will Carling. So, accidents do happen. Motor accidents account for about 2% of all deaths in the world. By the way, am I speaking too fast? I'm a bit of a motor mouth, but this might be off-putting. It might be difficult for my listeners to digest what I'm saying. So she went to, Ghislaine Maxwell was in New York in the early 90s. 1993, her father fell off his yacht. He was very close to the Israelis. I'm not sure if he was an Israeli citizen, but he visited there a lot. Quite a few of his relatives had been murdered in the Holocaust, so he had a great deal of fellow feeling for the Jewish state, the only place where people of his ethno-religious group were safe. But he was sailing his yacht in October 93, if I got that right, off the coast of Spain when he fell into the sea and drowned, and we're not quite got to the bottom of it. Did he have fair play? Did he jump? Was he pushed? Was it suicide? Because his business empire was collapsing. He borrowed and borrowed and borrowed, and everything was coming apart at the seams. There's a massive black hole he couldn't fill. Charles commented to Diana in the back of a car, it's a shame what happened to him, so obviously wasn't murdered or suicided. Well, I don't know about Princess Diana's lover. We're not really on to them. We're on to Ghislaine Maxwell. So her father died in somewhat mysterious circumstances and is buried in Mount Olive in Jerusalem. Oh, so here's a good gag. It transpired that Robert Maxwell had been ripping off the pension fund, stole hundreds of millions of pounds from the pension fund to try and prop up his business empire, and it failed. And the banks, the phone was jumping off the hook. They were demanding their money. He robbed Peter to pay Paul, borrowed and borrowed to cover his debts, and the whole thing was about to collapse. Was he going to blackmail people? He supposedly was selling a computer system with a trap door to Eastern European governments that then the Mossad could spy on them. Was he an agent of the Mossad? Was he about to squeal? Did the Mossad decide that he needed to be eliminated? I just don't know. The theories are abound. Didn't he steal a lot of money from the pension funds of his staff? Yes, Robert Maxwell did rip off the pension funds of his staff. Now, incidentally, I don't know of any suggestion that Ghislaine Maxwell was aware of this or was complicit. So I'm not suggesting she aided abetting that for one moment. So they wrote a Robert Maxwell joke book to raise money, a fighting fund for people who lost their pensions, because then it'd be very controversial if they were going to use the money raised by this comedy book to pay who should get how much. But what they did say, well, just to pay the lawyers' fees to try and sue, to try and get some money out of the Maxwell family. I don't know if it succeeded. But anyway, here are some Robert Maxwell jokes. Why did Robert Maxwell not have any showers on his yacht? Because he preferred to wash up on shore. How about that? Okay, what's the difference between Popeye and Robert Maxwell? Popeye got to Mount Olive alive because Robert Maxwell was buried on the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. Okay, what's the next one? So Ghislaine Maxwell, the early 90s, she spent the time in New York even after her father's decease, where she formed a romantic relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. It never led to wedding bells for her. Now she's now 57 and she's never had children. So she spent most of her time in New York subsequently. And then she got to know Prince Andrew, spending a lot of time in New York City and other places. He had a huge house, purpose-built. It wasn't by a house, already existed. It was built for him, but people said it looked like a branch of Sainsbury's, like a supermarket. But anyway, he sold that on to a Kazakh a multimillionaire, and it was sold for way over the odds, more than the asking price. Why? People said it was a thinly disguised bribe. So Prince Andrew spent a lot of time in Astana, the capital of Kazakhstan. It was only the late 90s when Astana was just emerging as a place to do business, this former Soviet Central Asian republic that is generously blessed with oil and gas reserves, with uranium, with coal, with various other minerals. It's now called Nur Sultan City in honor of the semi-retired dictator. Okay, another comment. Yes, I'm a worm farmer. I also take care of injured wildlife, as well as keeping an eye on our corrupt government, and the American government is a huge source of entertainment. Jojo, Britain's craziest worm woman. Oh, so you're in the United Kingdom. Well, please subscribe, ask others to subscribe and disseminate my videos. And if you request videos, I'll probably make the one you want. So back to Prince Andrew, spending a lot of time there, hanging out with Goga Ashkenazi, this multi-millionaire Kazakh banker. She was at Oxford at the same time as me. I didn't know her. God, she made the right career choice. I didn't. She'd married some older chap, which is why she has the surname Ashkenazi. Didn't have children with him, but she became the lover of the son-in-law, the president of Kazakhstan, managed to have a child with him. But so Prince Andrew has friends in low places. And notoriously at a dinner in 2010 in Kazakhstan for British businessmen, he said we should be allowed to bribe, otherwise we can't do business. He had a few daughters, but apparently she was his favorite because she was most like him. Imagine calling your yacht after one specific child when you have several. Yes, that's right. Lady Ghislaine was Robert Maxwell's yacht, the one he fell off and drowned, named in honor of this daughter of his. So his sons, Kevin Maxwell and the other one, they were the ones who kind of involved in the business empire, though nobody was convicted in relation to anything. So her relationship with Epstein eventually broke up, but then she was like his right-hand woman, hiring and firing staff, going to many of his residences, such as at Palm Beach, Florida. Another Zionist. Well, Robert Maxwell definitely was. I don't know about Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell. I don't know what their opinions on Israel are, so I shan't conjecture. So Prince Andrew spent an awful lot of time with Jeffrey Epstein, going to his various houses, socialising with him in London likewise. In 2008, Jeffrey Epstein, he was charged with solicitation of underage sex. I'm not sure the age of consent is in Florida. I think the thing is 18. And the charge is only related to Florida, not federal charges, which would be rather more serious about bringing someone from one state to another or sending money from one state to another for these immoral purposes. He was a little boy and used to sit on a peg to keep his anus loose for the sailors to use whenever they're missing their wives. My God, I never heard of that one. That's rather vulgar. I'd prefer not to hear about that. So Epstein, he got a plea bargain, a very lenient deal to spend just 1 year in prison, but he's allowed out for several hours a day to run his business empire, and that was that. He pleaded guilty and returned to having far graver charges dropped. So people say this was unjust. Had he been a nobody, if he hadn't been able to afford outstanding lawyers, then he would have been going down for decades, because the law in many states of the US is extraordinarily harsh. And then people are frightened into pleading guilty things they didn't do for fear of spending decades in prison. So that was him. He supposedly would get young women to recruit girls below the legal age, and they would massage him. They would just wear lingerie and perform frottage on him, things like that. I don't think it was actual sex as such. Obviously had real sex with adults, sometimes paid for. So he got himself into serious trouble. But the thing, the solids hit the fan again. Obviously, he was a close confidant of Donald Trump. Whatever Trump says, there's plenty of footage of them together. And Trump gave interviews saying what an outstanding chap Jeffrey Epstein was, who made hundreds of millions of dollars, and was a very generous donor to Harvard University and so on. Partly, I'm guessing, because he never completed higher education. That's why he had a bit of a chip on his shoulder, and maybe this is a way of compensating for his inferiority complex, and had meetings with people like Professor Alan Dershowitz at Harvard. So I'm not sure if he ever married or had children, actually, Epstein. So then things went wrong for him. In recent months, he was arrested. There was a whole host of underage sex charges he was going to face, and he must have assumed he was going to go down this time, and he was going to be spending most of his life in prison. He has children, does he? That I didn't know. So Ghislaine Maxwell, people have said all various things about her. Perhaps I shan't repeat them. I'm not suggesting that she's committed any crime whatsoever. But Prince Andrew knows her very well. She's an environmental activist. Prince Andrew knew Jeffrey Epstein very well. Even after Epstein was sent down, Andrew remained his friend, stayed at his house in New York, travelled on his plane, things like that. People says this shows a grave lack of judgment. Now, you might say there's a certain honour in sticking by your friend. Even if your friend has done wrong, you don't endorse that crime, but you don't abandon people. You say you've done a mistake, you made a mistake, you've done something immoral, you're repentant, you paid the price for it, and we should be forgiven. Jeffrey Epstein wasn't all bad. There were some good aspects to his personality. But when you're a royal, it's not really about you individually. You represent the United Kingdom and other Commonwealth realms, and you must not do anything which is contentious, which would cause people to think the worst of you. You're dragging the royal family's name through the mire. You must be above suspicion and try to be above criticism as much as possible. You're besmirching the reputation of the United Kingdom. The crown must not be thrown into the mud. So people have accused Prince Andrew of all sorts of crimes. I'm not saying I believe these accusations, saying that he reeked of alcohol. And one of the witnesses has really undermined a case there because, as I said, it's a very well-known fact that he completely abstains from spirituous liquor. And there are all sorts of private plane logs of where he was, but the logs are not very well kept, just initials. We don't know what the name is. It's been alleged by Virginia Roberts that Ghislaine also participated in something, I won't say it out loud. And there's another girl who that yesterday said that Maxwell and Epstein tried to instigate something else. I can't read the rest. Well, I know the various accusations against Miss Maxwell, but I'm not saying that I credit them whatsoever, or against His Royal Highness Prince Andrew, the Duke of York. So he's shown a distinct lack of judgment. You need to be more judicious in your choice of friends. He previously said he'd severed all ties with Mr. Epstein, when patently that was a fallacious statement. The presumption of innocence extends to both these people. So, yeah, it's caused the royal family to be brought into disrepute. So he's no longer a trade envoy for the United Kingdom. He's fouled up a number of times. There have been various statements issued on his behalf, vehemently and categorically denying any wrongdoing or witnessing any wrongdoing or having the least suspicion about what Mr. Epstein was up to. But he must have met Mr. Epstein on dozens of occasions and stayed, if you added all the days together in his house, it would be weeks. Admittedly, this is over the course of 20 years or more. But there we are. Obviously, he had large estates in Palm Beach and elsewhere. Something could be happening in one end of a building, or indeed in a separate building, that you would have no idea about. So his denials are plausible. All right, that's about all I got to say about His Royal Highness, the Duke of York, and Jeffrey Epstein. Of course, he could be charged with various offences in the United States. He could be extradited, and that really would be front page news. I don't think it's going to happen. Now, if Miss Maxwell, if she fears that she's in jeopardy, she'd be wise to take out Israeli citizenship and reside in the state of Israel, since Israel never extradites its own citizens. So I'm going to finish now.